Okay, I'm not sure I'm being seen, but let me just say that the first time I met Brian was at the Southern Museum of Flight. That was a couple of years ago. The Audubon Ladies Hiking Group had a tour and a lunch of the museum where Brian spoke to us about the past history and future of this wonderful place. I think if you remember, New Horizons also had a lunch at the Southern Museum several years ago. And I do remember using the simulator and crashing the plane while trying to land. At present, Brian is the executive director of the museum and has been a part of it for 15 years. They also have a wonderful publication called Flightlines, which highlights the Tuskegee Airmen this month. Brian is was born in Detroit, Michigan, but he grew up in one of my favorite Texas cities, San Antonio. Brian is a graduate of a number of military training schools, including the United States Army Airborne School, currently serves as an officer in the United States Coast Guard, and he is also a reservist in the Coast Guard and has been called to active duty numerous times, including a stateside deployment in 2010 with the Deepwater Horizon oil disaster off our Gulf Coast. In the last 4 or 5 years, he has coordinated recovery efforts from hurricanes Harvey, Maria, Florence, Barry, Sally, and assisted in relief efforts on flooding in the Gulf Coast. And also an educator. He has taught part-time at Huntington College, UAB, and Miles College. He completed his undergraduate degree at Texas A&M and has a graduate degree from the University of Alabama at Birmingham and has a PhD from the University of Alabama. He's served as the Southern Museum of Flight in a number of capacities and is now executive director. Brian is married, has wife and 2 daughters, and they live in Oak Grove. And we are really pleased to have Brian with us today.
Thank you very much, Ellen. And I appreciate you all having me today. Ellen, thank you for reaching out to me last year about this. And I certainly remember that visit you spoke of through our mutual friend, Mary Alice Carmichael. And Phil, thank you for coordinating this and getting me all set up. And I was glad to hear that Whitman Cross or Pete is on today. He and I spoke yesterday, and he's right on. He served in my position some years ago, and I spoke with another director of the museum this morning, and they're I guess it's a pretty exclusive group. There have only been 5 of us that have been the director of the museum, and 2 of us are on the Zoom call today. So I'm no math major, but I think that's 40% of the Southern Museum of Flight directors are on this call. So that's pretty cool. So once again, I really appreciate this opportunity. And yes, I do live in Oak Grove, and I am not in my office in Birmingham. I'm coming to you live and in living color from my hotel room in Mobile, Alabama. And I guess typically I wouldn't advertise the fact that I'm in a hotel room, but it relates to a little bit of what I'm going to talk about today, especially when I wrap up today's discussion and tell you all a little bit about where we are going when it comes to our educational operations at the museum. And I thought I'd start out with this right here. And let me also preface this presentation by stating that I'm not very articulate. So I've got a lot of pictures. So when you're not very articulate, you support what you're saying with a lot of photographs. So that's what I've done today. I also like to steal quotations. And I borrowed this one actually from a mentor of mine who presented it to me more than a quarter of a century ago when I was much more impressionable. But this is a quote from a politician, I figured it was also apropos since we're here right on the or in the wake of an election year. But this quotation from Lamar is something that really drives me and everything that we do at the museum. I think it hits close to home for me. So just wanted to share that with you all before getting into it. And as I move forward a little bit, wanted to give you a little bit of a background. When I came to the museum, um, shortly thereafter, we had adopted this logo, and it was we had incorporated our previous logo, which were the wings that you see, and we added an image, one of our crown jewels of the collection, our A12, and this worked well for us for a good while. Then in 2016, we celebrated our 50th anniversary and tweaked it a little bit to this. So in 1966, the museum was founded, and I was just talking about Mary Alice Carmichael, whom Ellen and I know well. And her mother is actually the founder of our museum's collection. And our collection started out in 1966 as a personal collection of hers, and then it moved to about 5 display cases at the library at Samford during that time when Samford University was transitioning from the old Howard College days. And then since then, we wanted to maintain some continuity from the previous logo, but uh, we also wanted to move on because we couldn't just hang around with the 50th forever. So we've adopted this. And I mentioned continuity because we kept the wings, we kept the Blackbird. We just placed it into a circle. We added the established 1966. And this one reproduces really well. It's a nice circle. And we have a long name, right? Southern Museum of Flight. I mean, when I give my email address like I did to Phil the other day, I say B Barsanti. I have a long name, and then at southernmuseumoflight.org. So, you know, in order for it to reproduce well, we really wanted to focus when it comes to marketing on what really says this is us. So flight is capitalized, Southern Museum of it's in lowercase, and then putting the established on there, I think is a testament to our longevity, and it kind of has a cool vintage look to it too. So we were all pleased with this. So this is what you're going to see moving forward for us. If you came to the museum today, this is one side of the building. And my presentation is a little bit about where we've been, a little bit about who we are now, and a little bit about where we are going. So it's sort of a three-part presentation this morning. If you came to the other side, uh, here's the atrium, and we have a Huey helicopter on a stick on that side. But one of the things that's occurred over the last several years is that we have acquired a lot. We actually have 104 aircraft in the collection today, and that's quite a bit. We only have about 55,000 square feet of indoor space and about a 7,000 square foot restoration facility. So back in 2010, we had embarked upon a relocation project, a potential relocation project. We conducted a feasibility study, looking at the feasibility of actually moving the museum's collection to another location. What came about as a result of that study, here's a satellite image of the Barber Motorsports Park in East Birmingham. And what you see just above the Barber Park there is I-20 going right out towards Atlanta. There's the Bass Pro Shop. But it's difficult to, as you can all can imagine, to find a good bit of acreage within the city limits of Birmingham. And it was important for us to remain in Birmingham. U.S. Steel was kind enough to come forward with a proposal regarding the donation of about 24 acres of property to be used for the new location of the Southern Museum of Flight. And what resulted after a number of years is what you see here in the overlay. This colored overlay with the orange and blue and yellow represents a large industrial technology park that U.S. Steel has named the Grand River Technology Park. What's graded right now is the orange and the blue. The blue is actually going to be the future home of the Southern Museum of Flight. And actually, what it's really going to be is campus number 2, as I'll tell you a little bit more about that when I get towards the end of this presentation. I also added the Buc-ee's logo there you see at the top. So many of you all here who are local in the Birmingham area have heard about the Buc-ee's that's been coming to, or that has come to town now. And if any of you all have traveled out to San Antonio, like Ellen mentioned earlier, along I-10, you can't go 3 or 4 miles without seeing a Buc-ee's billboard. It's like the Alexander Shannara billboards of East Texas. They're just all over the place. Now this place is pretty amazing. I took a photo here of the groundbreaking, and then this is actually an aerial photo of the Buc-ee's that's down in Lower Alabama. When you're on your way down to Gulf Shores and Orange Beach, this is right off the interstate. It's kind of a last stop for a lot of tourists. But the Buc-ee's is really this strange cultural phenomenon. The place out in Leeds, which will be adjacent to our second campus, it's got 55,000 square feet of retail space and 100 gas pumps. It's really an amazing place. They've got so much stuff there. If you like beef jerky, they've got like 2 whole sections just dedicated to beef jerky alone, and try their brisket too. A little shameless plug there for the barbecue fans. Some good stuff at Buc-ee's. But we're excited, and when you see the names here too at the in and around the new site, it kind of hits on what we were looking for when it came to potential for economic development. There already was good synergy with Southern Museum of Flight and the Barber Motorsports Park and the Barber Vintage Motorsports Museum. And that synergy is something that you just can't manufacture somewhere. So that was already built in. So that close proximity was important for us. And then this 100-acre project actually spawned a residential development. So what you see there in orange is a new residential development that is coming to the opposite side of the museum property, right along Rexlake Road. So stay tuned for that. I also included this little thumbnail. If you took the current museum, the 2 streets next to us, and all the property that the airport authority holds, where our aircraft, a lot of our aircraft anyway, currently sit, this is what we could do with it. The new footprint is about 5 times our current footprint. So it really opens up some great opportunities for us to grow and expand and do right by the museum's collection. If you drive out there now, you'll see this future home of sign. And here's a picture when the trees first started coming down back in 2019. And this was later on that spring. This was later on in the summer. By 2020 summer, we were looking like this. And then as we went into the fall and winter, there it is. And the museum site is what you see there in the foreground. In the background is the rest of the 40 plus, I want to say it's around 46 acres of technology park property that US Steel is currently marketing. So as you can imagine, having a high visibility site like this right along Barber Parkway as you go into the Barber Motorsports Park is really exciting for the museum folks. And I couldn't be prouder of the team that we've assembled to make this happen. A real coalition of folks, and it's been an exciting ride, and I'm really looking forward to it. We've phased this out into a number of phases over the next several years. Probably by phase 2, I will be retired myself, and I'll be ready to hand over the reins to somebody else. But nevertheless, I wanted to share that with everybody this morning. And I mentioned the synergy with the Barber Museum. Here's one of our aircraft at a Barber event in front of the Barber logo. And if you've ever been to the Barber Motorsports Park, I tell you, it is absolutely amazing what Mr. Barber has been able to do. I mean, I'm not even a real motorcycle guy. I've had some in my time, but I am just blown away every time I visit the museum. I mean, level after level of motorcycles. And then a couple of years ago, Mr. Barber embarked upon an expansion project of his own, about 85,000 square feet of additional space. And every time I visit the Barber Museum, I think about the potential for us. Here is a picture of the Museum of Flight and what we can do. This is an image that I'm teasing right now. This is sort of the front fascia of the new facility that our architects are letting me tease when I speak to groups and talk about our relocation project. So super exciting there. And I thought I'd tell you a little bit about our identity and what we've grown to become here in this second part of the presentation this morning. First and foremost, we're an aviation museum. That's our genre, right? That's our niche. And I think this secondary logo from the past says it all. I mean, everything from the early days of powered flight with the Wright brothers, all the way through the stealthy technology of the mid to late 20th century and beyond. If you came to the museum today, like Ellen's group did when I toured them around, we would start in our early aviation hangar. And this is an older wing of the museum. It's recently been renovated. And this is where we try to keep all of the oldest stuff that we've got. So we try to keep this room pre-1940s for our purposes, pre-World War II. We check out our Wright Flyer. The nice connection that the Wright brothers have to the great state of Alabama is that they will establish the country's first flight school just outside of Montgomery. And right in and around that spot will grow over the years to what we know now as Maxwell Air Force Base. So the first handful, give or take a few, of flight students in the country will graduate from their flight school here in Alabama at the beginning of the century. Then we move along to our Curtiss D model. Curtiss has a cool history in motorcycles and in aircraft. And there's Glenn Curtiss there in the Curtiss D model Type 4. The Curtiss has a cool local connection as well. The Curtiss is the first plane that will take off the deck of a Navy ship. So it has a military connection. And that local connection is that it takes off the deck of the city's namesake, takes off the deck of the USS Birmingham in 1910. So my Navy friends, they trace their roots back to 1910. As a matter of fact, about 10 years ago or so, 2010, they celebrated their 100th anniversary of flight in the United States Navy. Speaking of military connections, we'd move right along to our World War I exhibit. It features a Fokker D7. This is often regarded as the most effective fighter of World War I. So to give you an idea, by 1918, Fokkers will enter service by the springtime. And from the spring of 1918 till the wars end in November of that year, the D7s will be responsible for shooting down 565 Allied aircraft. 565 French, British, American, and other aircraft go down to this one. It didn't suffer from a lot of structural problems. Many of ours did at that time. It was powered by a big 901 cubic inch Mercedes engine. Even BMW built engines and supplied the power plants for these aircraft during this time. Ours has a cool history as well. It was featured in a movie back in the 60s called The Blue Max, starring George Papard and Ursula Andress. It was used as a Hollywood film crew aircraft where it would shoot aerial scenes. So it was fitted with a camera in the cockpit. That's 19 teens. And moving along into the 1920s, there's yours truly in front of a bunch of kids. And what I'm standing in front of there is probably the rarest piece in the museum's collection. That piece right there is the only one of 18 original Delta aircraft that still exists. So that right there is Delta's, essentially you're looking at Delta's first aircraft from the 1920s when they begin as a crop dusting company before transitioning to a passenger airliner by the end of the 1920s. Proud to have that piece on permanent display in our early aviation hangar. And then moving along on our timeline, we'd move into the 1930s and 40s with our Tuskegee Airmen exhibit. This picture was taken when we unveiled the first version of our Tuskegee Airmen exhibit back in 2008. We had about a dozen Tuskegee Airmen who were at the museum for the unveiling of this exhibition. It's, in my opinion, one of the finest Tuskegee Airmen exhibits in the country. Pictured here, a number of iconic Tuskegee Airmen, Colonel Herbert Carter, Bill Childs, often regarded as the father of the Tuskegee Airmen maintenance crews. Colonel Harry Ford standing there as well, who actually sat in on my interview when I interviewed for my position at the museum. So amazing shot here. And again, our Tuskegee Airmen exhibit, it's simply wonderful. It takes the visitor through the training process if they were to come to Tuskegee, Alabama back in the 1940s to be a part of this project. This is the PT-19. A student could spend 3 months or so in their primary phase of training before graduating to Tuskegee Army Airfield to go on to fly these two, the basic trainer, the BT-13, and the advanced trainer there in the background, the T-6. Roughly 9 months or so of primary, basic, and advanced flight training before a number of the Tuskegee Airmen will be deployed overseas to North Africa, Sicily, and mainland Europe, eventually engaging Nazi Germany in the skies during World War II. Some 900 plus, nearly 1,000 Tuskegee Airmen will come through the program at Tuskegee. More than 470 plus will be deployed overseas, over 160 casualties, highly decorated, but an important story for us to tell at the Southern Museum of Flight. There's a shot of the T-6. Of course, the Tuskegee Airmen are famous for flying the P-51 Mustangs, painted famously with the red tails. We see this reflected in popular culture a lot in the movies, in the HBO movie, and then the recent Lucasfilm movie, Red Tails. And I have a follow-up to the Tuskegee Airmen sort of towards the end of the presentation today. And then I take you again, moving along our timeline, more of a military orientation a little bit here, moving forward into our Korean War exhibit that features 2 fighter jets from the Korean War. What you see there is a MiG-15 that is painted in its North Korean paint scheme. Our scene depicts the defection of a young North Korean pilot who had escaped in 1953 from North Korea and flew his MiG-15 to Kempo Air Force Base in South Korea. And it represents a pivotal moment. It was the first time that we got to see one of these MiGs in flying condition, one that was airworthy. And that was important because then we could take this thing, really break it down, put it to its limits, see what it could do, pass along that intelligence and that knowledge to other NATO and allied air pilots so they would know what they were up against. Really great story. If you're looking for a good read, go to Amazon and find a MiG-15 to Freedom. It was written by Ken Rowe. At this time, his name was No Kum Sok. He came to the United States, has an incredible journey, incredible story, became an aeronautical engineer and professor. He is now retired. He lives down in Daytona, Florida. Then we move into our Vietnam War exhibit featuring our Vietnam War helicopters. What you see pictured here is the AH-1, the Cobra, and above it, its friend in the skies, the OH-6. These would work in teams with one another during the Vietnam War. And this was an incredible exhibit to be a part of. When we unveiled this exhibit, we had some 350 Vietnam veterans and their families in attendance for the unveiling. We had every branch of the service represented. We even had General Westmoreland's aide as the keynote speaker. And it was just a great experience. People will often ask me what my favorite aircraft in the collection is. And it's really hard because, you know, so many of my feelings are tied to the events, the people surrounding the aircraft. And it's hard for me to choose, but this was indeed one of my favorite events when it came to the unveiling of this exhibit. And then we'd move into some of our Cold War iconic pieces. This is a large Mi-24 Hind helicopter, a big Soviet helicopter that was used extensively during the Soviet war in Afghanistan back in the early 80s. These are still used today in North Africa, the Middle East, Eastern Europe. The Russians still fly this particular aircraft. Ours belonged to the Army and came to the museum some years ago, but it's a really intimidating beast of a helicopter. When these things are fully armed and loaded, they weigh about 25,000 pounds. They're pretty fast movers too. This thing can get up to around 200 miles an hour plus top speed. So just an incredible piece that we added to the museum's collection. And of course, our Blackbird exhibit featuring our A-12. Our A-12 it's relatively large. It actually sits in our outdoor display. Here it is, pictured here. The A-12 is still one of the fastest manned jet aircraft ever produced. The later versions will be the SR-71s, and the last SR-71 will be retired by the Air Force in 1990, and a gentleman by the name of Ed Yielding, retired Air Force colonel. He lives up in Florence, Alabama today. He will make the final flight for the Air Force back in 1990. If you can imagine this, He's going to fly from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C., and they're going to retire the aircraft and take it over to the Smithsonian. And along the way, they're going to set several speed records, is what they're planning. So from Los Angeles to DC, picture it coast to coast, from gear up to gear down, 67 minutes and 54 seconds. They hit speeds greater than 2,200 miles an hour, more than 3 times the speed of sound. Just an incredible aircraft that is pretty much obsolete now, and they're all retired. I'm in Mobile, and the A-12 version, there are actually 3 of them in Alabama. One is here in Mobile at Battleship Park with our friends there at the USS Alabama. We have one at the Southern Museum of Flight. And if you go visit my friends at the Space and Rocket Center in Huntsville, Alabama, they have the other. And there's less than 2 handful of A-12s left, and it's pretty incredible that we have 3 of them here in the state of Alabama. Yeah, there's one of them is at CIA headquarters, and unless you can get into CIA headquarters, you can't see that one. There's another one on the USS Intrepid in New York, and there's some others spread across the country as well, but relatively few of these. Another rare piece, but iconic piece that we're fortunate to have in the museum's collection. And second, our bread and butter. I really love this picture here because it really says what we do. Our bread and butter is education. And what we did several years ago was correlate all of our educational programming with the Alabama Course of Study standards. So it really made it a no-brainer for teachers to build in a field trip to the Southern Museum of Flight during their planning process before a school year. And it made it, such an easy sell to, administrators, principals, program coordinators, because we viewed ourselves as an extension of the classroom. The lesson plans were already created, and we did this across academic disciplines. So it's quite interdisciplinary, from mathematics to science to social studies to language arts, reading, and the arts, you name it. We've got a curriculum, we have a lesson plan for that particular class from K through 12. And then we beefed up more of our educational programming by offering merit badges for our Boy Scouts. We currently offer 2 and are on the verge of 3. We offer the Aviation Merit Badge, and we also offer the Weather Merit Badge, and soon the Communications Merit Badge. We're also a science and technology center. We have a excellent weather unit, lends itself to the Weather Merit Badge as well. Many of the science and tech oriented items are hands-on. We've got flight simulators like Ellen mentioned earlier, crashing the flight sim. The good thing there, Ellen, was at least you got to press the reset button in the flight sim. We're building a new interactive computer lab with flight simulation. So what we can do with you, Ellen, we can do with students in a lab environment, facilitating up to 32 students at a time. We've got interactive flight simulation stations that are a little bit more gaming oriented. And I'm really excited about this component when it comes to our flight simulation. The VR headsets are being added as well, so you can get the virtual reality experience. We've partnered with our friends at GameStop, and as you all will know, GameStop made quite the headlines over the last couple of weeks when it comes to the stock market. But the GameStop folks have been great with us in providing us with these items. And these kids are born with these in their hands today. And if you can take that and turn it into a lesson, you've got them hooked from the beginning, and they don't even know that they're learning along the way. Here's a nice screenshot of me actually flying one of the simulators, an F-18, over an island. And I mean, it's really legitimate. I mean, I almost fell out of my chair in the VR world, thinking I was really rolling over. Pretty amazing stuff. And when we can't have groups come to us, we take a little bit of the museum to them. If we can't take something large like one of our aircraft, which we can certainly do with about a half dozen of outreach aircraft, we take smaller items like our wind tunnel technology to the classrooms. We've also become more of a cultural arts resource with our art exhibitions. We were proud to host one entitled Enduring Legacy. It was a collection commissioned by the United States Air Force. Chris Hopkins was the artist you saw pictured there a moment ago. And Enduring Legacy honored Alabama's famed Tuskegee Airmen, the first Black military aviators in the United States. We've got our Shadow Gallery, a permanent exhibition that features art that was commissioned by the CIA. And the really cool thing about this particular exhibition is that these pieces feature aircraft that are in the museum's collection, including our A-12. There's a painting called Untouchable by a really talented airbrush artist by the name of Drew Blair. And we're proud to feature this particular exhibition as well. And as we diversify, we've gone into the performing arts realm. We've had the Alabama Symphony Orchestra perform. There's Chris Confessori conducting this particular evening in our South Wing. We had the Air Force Band perform a couple of times for some patriotic performances around the 4th of July. We even had contemporary ballet. This was really exciting. I mean, these folks were literally hanging from the rafters. And then last year, so proud to host Opera Birmingham, where we featured an opera, 2 performances of an opera entitled Glory Denied. And when it comes to the diversification here, it really gives us the opportunity to bridge audiences, perhaps audiences that would not have come to our museum or would not have gone to visit our cultural arts partners. And, here we saw folks who may never have gone to an opera that, are quote unquote museum folks of ours. And because the opera had to do with, our genre, this opera told the story of a young aviator who was an observer aboard an O-1 who was shot down over Vietnam, Colonel Jim Thompson. And Colonel Thompson spent, more years as a POW than anyone in our country's young history. And this tells the story of the tragedy of his repatriation and whatnot. I won't give it away. It's excellent if you ever have the opportunity. Glory Denied. And we've come more and more here of an event venue and convention center with our diverse facility spaces, dinners and seminars, smaller, more intimate events, larger conventions, specialty events. We do receptions. The really popular thing is the wedding and reception combo. And the weddings and receptions lend themselves to really neat opportunities for photography. This is one of my favorite photos that we've taken over the years. I mean, where else are you going to get a picture like this with the bride standing in front of a vintage World War II era aircraft? It's just amazing stuff. We always have to balance the fact that we're also an attraction, always balancing education and entertainment. That's our little kids' playroom. And here you have a school group eating under one of our jets on display in the outdoor exhibit area. But it makes me think of the potential with enough property and what we can do, even with an outdoor component, with nice landscaping, outdoor pavilions, outdoor classrooms. Who knows, perhaps an amphitheater, maybe full motion flight simulation like you see here. And perhaps even this, maybe indoor skydiving again, always finding that harmonious balance between education and entertainment. And this is where I wanted to wrap up today with our workforce development component that we have embarked upon since 2019. So over the last year and a half now, we've been going down the road of workforce development. And we really saw this as an extension of our already existing educational programming, where we could offer aviation maintenance programs and certification programs at the Southern Museum of Flight, avionics technician, aviation electrician technician, all the way perhaps to the airframe and power plant technician, what we often refer to as an aircraft mechanic, perhaps leading to associate's and bachelor's degrees into mechanical engineering and other higher ed opportunities. It made good sense from the beginning to turn to 2 potential partners. The first, the Alabama Community College System, really made sense to us because we knew and had already identified gaps within the industry. We had also identified another gap when it came to offerings in our market. The community college system does a great job with their aviation programs. They operate about 5 campuses in the state that offer some type of aviation program. However, we thought that we could fill a gap in the Birmingham metro area by bringing these programs, especially in the wake of the economic development projects that have taken place over the last 10, 20 years in the state, with Boeing coming to Alabama, with Lockheed now expanding in Alabama, the Airbus facility here in Mobile, as well as AIDT that has already embarked upon this in this market. And that's where I'm actually going this morning. I'm actually going to visit one of AIDT's aviation training facilities in conjunction with Airbus to tour the facility to see what we could not only replicate but augment and offer to others who are interested in getting into the aviation industry. And when we talk workforce development, we don't just use it as a buzz term. I don't just use it as a buzz term. I know it's popular to use, but when we talk about workforce development, we are talking about highly skilled individuals that are going to be marketable members of the workforce with a credential that will go right to work. And the earning potential is just simply amazing for our AETs and our ANPs. So uh, a whole lot more than probably a lot of us ever expected. When I was presenting this to our friends at the city council, I was talking about the earning potential for ANPs to start in the 80 to 90,000 range annually. you know whoever thought, I mentioned we're all college people, that we would be making that kind of money with a bachelor's degree, let alone with a certification that aligned with Associates of Applied Science degree, which sets that student up for good success if they wanted to parlay that, say, into a bachelor's degree and move on. One of the great things that the Alabama Community College system is doing in conjunction with Auburn University right now is a 2+2 program with Southern Union Community College, whereby a student can enroll at Southern Union, earn their A&P certification as well as their associate's degree, and then seamlessly transition to Auburn into their Bachelor's of Aviation Management program. It's a great opportunity for our young people, and we hope to bring a little bit of that to the Birmingham area as well. These are just a number of organizations that have come on board to support us in this endeavor, and we're really excited about this as we move forward. This is one of our current restoration projects that these students will actually get to work on. This is a Tuskegee Airmen B25, an aircraft flown by the Tuskegee Airmen here in Tuskegee, Alabama, back in 1945-46. This is a great story to tell, too. It's a rare piece. This is the only B25 still in existence that was flown by the Tuskegee Airmen. And these last couple of years have been an interesting ride for us. It was a little bit of Hollywood around the museum for a while. We were featured on an episode of Stacey David's Gears. This is one of those reality building type programs, hot rods and classic cars. And Stacey was building a truck that was inspired by the Blackbird, and they filmed at the museum for a couple of days. We were also featured in a snippet of Mysteries at the Museum on the Travel Channel. I won't give away the mystery, but it had to do with the MiG-15 and the defection of the North Korean pilot, in case you catch it on a rerun. And if you get the opportunity, come see us. We're open Tuesday through Saturday. We have some limited hours right now as we are moving within our first phase of reopening due to the COVID-19 mitigation that's in place. So from 10 to 2 right now, Tuesday through Saturday. And if you are interested in more information, I'm going to give you my contact information in just a moment. But this is the rest of that quote that I shared with you at the beginning. It's a little bit longer, and it's actually a quote that's coined at the University of Texas. And I thought I would come full circle and wrap up with the rest of it here. And again, back to what I was just mentioning, if you're interested in getting in touch with me, here's my contact info. Please feel free to give me a holler, shoot me an email. I'd be glad to meet with you. Look me up if you come to the museum. This is what I love to do. I love talking about this stuff. I'd be glad to give you a guided tour around the museum, take you behind the scenes, check out our restoration facility. So if you all have any questions for me, I'd be glad to entertain any that you all may have at this time.
Well, I can start off by saying that I thought that was an excellent presentation. I've been to the Southern Museum of Flight any number of times over the years, and you told me some things that I didn't know about your collection and all, and it makes me want to go back and visit again real soon. I'm sort of curious, given the challenges of aircraft museums, and of course I'm thinking of places like the Air and Space Museum in Washington, which I've been to any number of times, and the Naval Air Museum down in Pensacola, which, wow, that has a lot of airplanes down there.
Mhm.
The challenge of having an indoor facility to store airplanes is, wow, it must be quite, you can't, airplanes take up a lot of space. But with that in mind, Are there any particular airplanes that you would like to see in the collection, or types of airplanes that you don't either currently have or would like to add to?
Sure, sure. And great points, Phil. You're right on. I mean, the nature of the beast of aviation museums, really is highlighted by the fact that there simply has to be an outdoor component, right? I mean, in most aviation museums, even the largest ones around the country, there's some sort of outdoor component, just because these things are just so massive, right? And it's very difficult to do. If we could put them all indoors, certainly we would want to do that. Um, but I often tease, my museum friends and other genres. It's not like hanging art and storing them and moving, pieces around. I mean, sometimes you're moving tens of thousands of pounds, right? That take up, lots of real estate out there on the museum floor. So it does present the challenges. I think though that, having the opportunity to do it on our own property, uh, like I'd mentioned too earlier, nicely landscaped with additional outdoor pavilions, outdoor spaces, and classrooms to allow people to get up close and personal with them as well. Bringing just that really simple interactive experience to the general public is key. And then the second part of your question, what would I like to see? Yeah, some of them are so big. I hate to keep acquiring things when I don't have anywhere to put them yet. However, it's coming. But World War II, warbirds are always, very popular with folks. It's always great to have those. That's why I'm glad we have the Tuskegee Airmen exhibit that features some of the era's aircraft, as well as the B-25 that has come to us. It would be great to have some of the fighters from that time. We're also looking at the opportunity to secure a U-2, possibly. That, along with the D-21 drone that we have in the A-12, almost completing our Blackbird collection, would be neat. And we're one aircraft away from completing our Century series of fighters, from F-100 to 101, 102, all the way through. That's pretty exciting too. So we may have that opportunity coming in the future. So good questions, Phil. Thank you.
I have a question. How do you keep all these planes?
I have a question.
Yeah, it's a challenge. So, processes of facelifts, repainting, moving them indoors to repaint. We're going to have that opportunity at the new site with a new maintenance facility. Applying anti-corrosives to the aircraft is important, because that good thing is they're not going to rust, right? Since they're aluminum, but they will corrode. So the anti-corrosives are important in maintaining outside. Otherwise, you're right on there, Douglas. The weather is just going to beat them, But on the flip side, a number of these are, they were born to be outside too, right? They sit on aircraft carriers. Many of them are on aircraft carriers as museums today. So it's just important that we do that. Our issue when it comes to maintenance is that we just, we have a very small staff, small personnel, and a small volunteer corps. So that does present a challenge, again, simply because of the nature of the beast. And we have more than 100 now in the collection, and about a quarter of them, 25 or so, that sit outside. It does pose some challenges, but there are some mitigation measures that we can take to assist us in that.
Phil, I'd like to make a comment. Back in the 90s, I met Brian when I was director of the museum, and little did I know where he would be years later. I have to say he's remarkably the right man for the job at this point, in an incredible history and future for this museum. When I guess it was in the early 90s that I met Glenn Messer, who was the founder of the museum. And at that time, it was said that he actually soloed Lindbergh. So you can imagine his age at that time. Whether it's true or not, it's a great story. Good luck to you, Brian.
Hey, thanks for the kind words, Pete. That means a lot coming from you, and really appreciate that. Appreciate you being here on this call today.
Brian, I might pass on something. My favorite plane in your shop is the Air Coupe. I actually learned to fly on one of those in the 1950s.
Yeah, the Air Coupe with its tail, it's got a nice cult following of folks. People remark and express those same sentiments to me all the time, Keith. You're right on with those.
It only had 85 horsepower, I think, no radio and no rudder pedals.
Yeah, that's right. That's an interesting piece, isn't it?
Yes.
Anytime you have a strange aircraft like an air coupe like that, they always tend to create a nice cult following of fans. Well, all right. Well, hey,
Yeah, well, thank you once again.
thank you guys.
This was a very interesting presentation, and I thank you for coming and talking to us this morning.
Absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity. You know, if there's anything I like better than what I do at the museum, it's getting out and about and talking about it. So perhaps later on down the line, I can provide you guys with an update, maybe in a year or two down the road. And those of you that are local, have you out at the museum for a luncheon and a tour like we had in the past.
Well, that would be wonderful. Thank you again.
All right.
All right. We'll see everybody next,
Thanks, guys.
Friday, we're having Friday Forum, so everybody's invited if you'd like to come. And next Tuesday, we have our nominating committee, and we'll see you next week, if not tomorrow. So have a great day.